without further ado, this is not about us. This is about the star of the day, Mr. Eddie Healy. I want to say that when I moved to Dallas when I was 16 years old, there were only a few events happening. And one of those was managed by Mr. Healy. He had, and he still has the Brookhaven Allegro guitar ensemble. And as soon as I heard the opportunity, I went and took it. And it was such a beautiful experience for me. I was always treated with kindness. The music was organized for all levels. And the greatest thing of all, it was that Mr. Healy did all of the arrangements. And it was just impressive for me to see that really that hard work that he puts into his work. And it was so inspiring for me at that time and still at this moment in my life that I wanted him to be or opening for this talk series because it's hard to create new opportunities for the city. It's hard to take the leadership, and he does it, and he does it so well with so much humility. And Mr. Healy, I'm now going to give you the stage. Thank you so much for doing this for us. I really appreciate it.
Well, Abraham, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really glad to be able to talk. I know I know you said I was the star, but what I'm interested in talking about is how we make things really work as a community in Dallas Fort Worth, and how we can continue to grow and strengthen our community in Dallas Fort Worth. So a lot of what I talk about, I'm going to be viewing through the lens of community building and networking, and not really from a business perspective, but in terms of the way that we musicians also have to do that. First, I want to thank my host. I want to thank Abraham for this opportunity. I want to thank the Texas Guitar Society for furnishing myself and so many of my fellow professionals with these opportunities, because this is a series, and you'll have opportunities to hear from some very fine professionals as this series unfolds, including but not limited to Olga Amalkina Vera of Collin College, a wonderful composer and guitarist herself. You're going to be hearing also from Gabriel de Hoyos, the guitar builder and guitar repair man. I hate to say repairman; it doesn't sound quite right, but Gabriel does some very fine work and has done some very fine work for guitarists all over the Metroplex and beyond. And I know that Abraham can fill you in about more of what's going on in this series as it unfolds, but check out their website. It's just Texas Guitar Society, not org, but .com, right? TexasGuitarSociety.com. If you guys reserved your spot in this Zoom chat that way, then you already know about this, but I would recommend that you look at all of the other people who are going to be appearing on this series. So what I'd like to do first is talk to you a little bit about how I have a career. How did this happen? It's not the easiest thing in the world to have a career in music, and I learned that from my mother. My mother was an aspiring musician when she was younger. In fact, she was a pretty successful local jazz performer. She was quite successful in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She performed in a jazz trio with my father, who was a very accomplished jazz pianist. My mother was quite young when she started her jazz career. I think she made her professional debut at 17, if I recall correctly. I still have an article saved from when she made her professional debut, and she got this very glowing praise from one of the Dallas Morning News writers at the time, Philip Wunsch. And it was at one of those performances that she met the dean of the music department at Eastfield College, which at the time was called Eastfield College. It was one of the several campuses in the Dallas County Community College District, which has been restructured into Dallas College. So I'm going to come back around to that in a second. But she met him, and he said, you've got just tons and tons of ability. You're really great. I think you could be even greater. I think you should go to school. My mom says that she kind of laughed about it. She thought, geez, I'm already out here doing it. I'm already making money. Why would I go to school? And this guy said, I think there's a lot that you don't know yet that could help you grow tremendously as a musician, as a creator of music. And he said, I'll give you a scholarship. And she said, well, okay, right. So my mom wound up at Eastfield College. She forged very positive relationships with the members of the music faculty there and other musicians who were studying music at Eastfield College at the time. And the reason I'm addressing that with you is not that I'm going to tell you my entire history from birth, but because when it came time for me to begin thinking about college, I said, I think I want to go to college. I want to study guitar. I want to begin studying classical guitar because I hadn't done that yet. I was a self-taught electric guitarist playing chiefly hard rock music. And I said to my mom, "Yeah, I think I want to go to college and learn classical guitar and become a better guitarist and become a better musician in general." And she said, "I think you should go to Eastfield." I said, "Okay." And she said, "I mean, I went there. I had great teachers. The people with whom I studied are still teaching there, and I think you would get a great education from those people." So I said, "Okay. I mean, you're the expert. You've been down this road. You know what we're talking about." So I went. I auditioned over at Eastfield as a freshman. I took some compositions I'd written for electric guitar and actually took the musical notation for these pieces. I did my audition. I got a scholarship offer. I studied with my very first guitar teacher ever, Dr. Enric Madriguera, who is now the director of guitar studies at UTD and the artistic director of the annual Texas Guitar Festival and Competition, which has been running now for 20 years, basically. It started around 2000. I think we just did our 19th. We're moving into our 20th, so that's a big deal. And if you want to know more, obviously, you can check out the UTD website. You can go to ah.utdallas.edu. I'm going to put that in the chat so you can find out more about the Texas Guitar Festival and Competition. It's a very big event that happens here in Dallas and Fort Worth every year that you may, in fact, have attended. I know several of you have, and if you hadn't, you should. Over the years, we've had tremendous artists like the LA Guitar Quartet, Scott Tennant, Los Romeros, David Russell several times, Elliot Fisk, a lot of the very well-known guitarists from all over the world. So I started studying with Dr. Madriguera before transferring over to the University of North Texas to study with Tom Johnson, who is still the director of guitar studies at that school. I maintained my connection to my professors, my music professors at Eastfield. Even then, after having left Eastfield, I would periodically communicate with them, and I'd drop them a line and let them know how things were going with my studies at UNT. After I completed my undergraduate studies at UNT, I went to SMU to study with the very, very exceptional guitar pedagogue Robert Guthrie. Many of you are alumnus of Robert Guthrie's studio too, and I had a very good experience with Professor Guthrie. I learned a great deal from a world-renowned instructor. And while I was at SMU, I had a year left in my education. I got a call from Dr. Madriguera from Eastfield College. He was still at Eastfield College at the time. And Dr. Madriguera said, "When are you done?" And I said, "Well, I've got another year on the master's, and then, I move forward from there." And he said, "Call me when you're done. We have work for you." So how did that happen? It didn't just happen because I was a hardworking student. It didn't just happen because I made good grades when I was studying at Eastfield. It really happened because I stayed in touch with them. And I'll tell you who gave me that piece of information too. That was my mom. My mom said, "You know what? These professors like you. You're doing really good work. You've been a very successful student. Don't lose connection to them. Don't lose contact with them. Reach out to them periodically over time to let them know how you're doing." And thank them, and express your gratitude for the education that you gave them, because I certainly was grateful for getting my start with such great professors as Dr. Madriguera. Professor Harold Lucky, Dr. Harold Lucky was my ear training instructor, and I learned a great deal from him about theory and some things about composition as well. And he and Dr. Madriguera were both instrumental in getting me my first collegiate teaching position outside of grad school. Now, while I was in grad school, though, while I was at SMU, I was forging positive relationships with Professor Guthrie and several of the other students there. And one of the students who was graduating a year before me said, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving soon. I'm going to be graduating. I'm going to be leaving. And I've been teaching at a place called the Gray School of Music, Gray. The proprietor of the Gray School of Music is a lady named Vicki Gray, who started in her home, started teaching piano, and later expanded her business to the degree that she needed a real studio space, and she purchased a portion of what is now the full Gray School of Music, and for a while was teaching still just piano, but eventually brought guitarists on board. And in 2002, while I was finishing up my master's, I began teaching there as well. That opportunity came to me because of networking, because of positive relationships I had forged with one of my colleagues in the grad program at SMU. And then when I finished my graduate studies at SMU, I was prepared to move into my first collegiate teaching position, part-time teaching position at Eastfield College with Dr. Madriguera. 2 years after that, that was 2003, and 2 years after that, I got two offers during the same semester, one of which came from Dr. Madriguera, who was already also teaching UTD. He said, "You know what, we've got an extra introductory guitar class we're going to begin offering, and we'd like to bring you on to teach. How does that sound?" I said, "It sounds great. I'd love to do that." So I started teaching not only at Eastfield, but also at UTD. I had one class. And in the same semester, the late, great Sabina Madriguera, the director of the Collin College Guitar Studies program, contacted me and said, you know what, Dr. Madriguera, her husband, had recommended me, and she said that she had some classes that she'd like me to teach at Collin College. So now I was teaching at the Gray School of Music because of somebody with whom I had a positive relationship, and I was teaching at Eastville College and UTD and Collin College, all because of recommendations that had been made by people who had faith in me, people with whom I had maintained positive relationships. You see where I'm going with this, right? Nothing happened just because I was the best or I was the smartest or because I had the nicest guitar. I have a nice guitar, but it wasn't any of that stuff. It was because of the people who trusted me, who had faith in me, who valued my work ethic, who valued the priority that I placed on community building, which is sort of what this whole thing is about. Um, I was at a point in my career that I thought you only say no if it's just absolutely impossible, or if there's no money whatsoever attached to this whole thing. You know, if you're talking about putting in a major time commitment, and it's free, that's different, right? But I couldn't say no. I thought, you know, God, I'm teaching at 4 different places now. I'm driving all over the Metroplex. There were days, and this was for several years, where I would teach at 3 different places. I would start in the morning at Eastville College. I'd go teach a class over at UTD, and then I'd finish the evening at Collin College. So sometimes I started my teaching day at 8 a.m. and I was finishing my teaching day at 9. I don't know. I think Anush could probably tell how late that class used to go. I think it used to go till about 9 p.m., maybe later. So it was a very lengthy thing that was going on. Um, anyway, what I want to do now is I want to share with you just a little bit of my music, and I want to talk to you about why I'm showing you this. So first, if you'll have a look at this document here, you're seeing one of a number of pieces that I've had published, which has been published with the Le Production Stars, a great publisher, a very fine publisher in Quebec. You can see here Le Production Stars. I'm going to probably later drop their website in the chat. In fact, I have since had multiple publications with DAWs, and so I'd like you to be able to have a look at those, especially for those of you who are interested in looking up and availing yourself of some of their sheet music. They've published a number of really fine composers, not the least of which is my colleague Olga Makina-Vera, who's going to be appearing next week on this talk. So anyway, going back to the shared document here, the reason I'm showing you this piece is a piece that I composed in 2005, early in my teaching career at Eastville College. This was the first piece that I composed that was for a variety of different levels for guitarists. And what I mean by that is that I walked into a room that had a very small ensemble, 4 members, one of whom was actually fairly advanced for a community college student. The other 2 had a great deal of potential, but were not nearly quite as experienced or advanced as the other student, and one of whom was in his first semester of collegiate guitar ensemble studies. He was very new to music reading. He was very new to the guitar, so it was a major challenge, and I thought, I'm clearly going to have to create some repertoire for these people. So what you can see that happens in the excerpt that I'm showing you here is that we begin with guitars 2, 3, and 4 playing, and a lot of silence, a lot of rest going on in guitar 1. But I think you can see, even for those of you who are not avid music readers, that right here, once the guitar 1 part comes in measure 11, that it's a more complicated part. It's higher in register, which requires a little bit more reading prowess, and considerably more complex than the part that I've put on guitar 4. Guitar 4 represents the part that was composed specifically for my brand new guitar ensemble student, right? I wrote this with this student in mind. I thought, what can he read? What can he play? Okay. I continued this tradition. I continue this tradition to this day, and now I want to move on to another piece, whereas in the first piece, I showed you that I had a more complex guitar 1 part. I want to show you that in one of my more recent publications with DAWs, it's actually the guitar 3 part, the accompaniment part, that is more complex. You can see here that the guitar 1 and 2 parts are far simpler, where we have a much more complicated and faster moving guitar 3 part. If you look very closely, you'll see that there is a little 8 at the bottom of this treble clef, indicating that this guitar part is intended for a contra guitar. I published this piece, I should say I composed this piece with the idea in mind that this could be played as either a 3 guitar piece, just featuring guitars 1, 2, and 3, or with an optional, it's essentially a bass part that could be played on a guitar that's tuned an octave lower than the standard guitar. And I did that so that there was more flexibility in people who wanted to program a piece of this kind for their guitar ensembles. If they said, well, I really need pieces for 3 guitars, this piece works quite well for just 3 guitars if you're playing guitars 1, 2, and 3. But we also have guitar 4 that you could include if somebody has the kind of guitar orchestra that includes a contra instrument of that kind. Here we have an arrangement I did many years ago of a 19th century era Spanish composer. And you can see here that I've got a soloist part designated right at the top because at the time I arranged this piece for premiere by my Brookhaven Allegro Guitar Orchestra. The Brookhaven Allegro Guitar Orchestra, by the way, is a group that it was conceived by the artistic director of the Allegro Guitar Society. And for those of you who are familiar with the Allegro Guitar Society, you undoubtedly have seen a number of the very fine events that they have hosted. A lot of the great artists from all over the world that have had performances that were sponsored by the Guitar Society. Well, the director of the Allegro Guitar Society, Christopher McGuire, came back to me in 2012 and said, I'd like you to start a community guitar orchestra. It wouldn't be a credit thing like the other things you're doing at your colleges. This would be for anybody to take just for fun. And I've been doing that since 2012 alongside my very fine duet partner, Brandy Estwick, the mezzo-soprano that many of you have heard and enjoyed. She's been my co-director of the Brookhaven Allegro Guitar Orchestra all these years, has sometimes conducted in my absence when I chose to sit in and play with the ensemble. She has been a vocal soloist with the ensemble. So anyway, this piece was arranged for that ensemble, and since I had one particular student who was involved in the ensemble at that time, who was a bit more advanced than the other members, I did somewhat simpler accompanimental parts, and as you can see, a more rhythmically complex, more highly syncopated, and faster solo part. We can see that at the top of this page here, right? So I have this long tradition of doing compositions and arrangements for people that I hope will be more inclusive, that will enable me to avail myself of players who may have considerably less experience and also players who are vastly more experienced. Here we have an excerpt from an arrangement I did a number of years ago from the Simon and Garfunkel piece, their seminal work, The Sound of Silence, which has been performed several times since, not the least of which at the Houston Classical Guitar Festival just a couple of years back. Here again, I have both more complex parts. You can see here that I have parts with chordal and arpeggiation going on. I have fairly simple melody parts. I also have parts intended for guitars to strum with the indicated rhythms above the staff. So we have strumming guitars. There were percussive effects that were used. Here you can see I actually had a bassist who was involved in the premiere, and this was a literal bass guitarist rather than a guitarist playing on a bass range instrument. I had a longtime private student who had been studying electric bass with me and got involved for several years in my community guitar ensemble, the Brookhaven Allegro Guitar Ensemble, and is now concluding her undergraduate studies at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. But at the time, she was playing on these, and I was trying to ensure that she could be included and that other people who were of, I guess, less experience could also be involved in arrangements of this kind. So now I'm going to show you another of my arrangements here. A little bit broader guitar orchestra arrangement. You can see more parts. My bass player was also involved at this time, but in this one I also availed myself of soloists so that there would sometimes be people who would be soloed out. They would play these percussive effects, and then the other people playing the guitar one part would drop out in favor of a single soloist. So here we're hearing just one person. All right, so we left off in my arrangement of the Wild Rover, which as you can see is a traditional Irish tune with which many of you may be familiar. I included my bass player here. I had soloists who were playing somewhat more complex portions of the piece. Again, I employed the services of a strummer, essentially somebody who could strum the chordal accompaniment to this, which I thought was appropriate for a piece of this kind, since this is a folkloric piece. There are percussive effects. This is a very raucous kind of piece. The funny thing is the dichotomy of the Wild Rover is that it's a piece about temperance. It's a piece about not drinking anymore and being more responsible. But where does it get played? It gets played in the Irish pubs all the time, right? Where everybody's drinking and shouting along with the songs and banging on tables. Literally, that's one of the things you do when the Wild Rover is being played. So I was having the guitars mimic the banging on the table here, as you can see. This piece is something that not only have I used and premiered with my Brookhaven Allegro Guitar Orchestra, but had a group playing in Madrid in 2016. One of the other opportunities that came through me through the positive relationships I've forged with my colleagues is the opportunity to work on an annual basis with the Summer Chamber Art Madrid Festival, a festival in which at least a couple of you have participated. And and so this is one among many pieces that I've actually used in my capacity as one of the professors and one of the directors in the Chamber Art Madrid Festival. And this one is a great deal of fun, but again was something that I intended to be somewhat easy in certain parts and somewhat more challenging in others, so that people who are at a higher level can remain sort of mentally and emotionally engaged in the process of playing these pieces. Certainly, I can make all the parts easy, but then I make sort of lose some people's excitement and engagement. But I also don't want the pieces to be prohibitively difficult for the people who may be less experienced and less technically proficient. So I also wanted to share with you, in addition to some of those arrangements, a piece that I wrote, as you can see, in 2017. This was in the last edition of the Classical Minds Guitar Festival that took place here in the States. The Classical Guitar Minds Festival has since moved overseas. It was spearheaded initially by Valerie Hartzell. It was Valerie Hartzell's brainchild, and Valerie invited me to come on to the Classical Minds Guitar Festival as her education director after I had, I had known Valerie for a number of years, and we'd maintained a positive friendship for a number of years before I appeared at her festival as a vendor. And I took several of my publications with me at the time, as well as my CD, which was released in 2012. In fact, I intended to share with you a link at which you can sample my CD, listen to my CD, and I should do that now while it's on my mind, so I'll drop that in the chat as well. But anyway, after my appearance as a vendor at Valerie's Festival, she asked me to come on as her education director. And even though Valerie herself has moved overseas, and she has, by extension, moved to a festival overseas, the extant Houston Classical Guitar Festival has taken me on as their education director. But before the Houston Classical Guitar Festival came to fruition, the last stateside edition of the Classical Minds Guitar Festival, excuse me, was an occasion for which I wrote this piece. And you can see that I have some names next to the guitar parts here instead of guitar parts, instead of saying guitars 1, 2, and 3. And there's a reason for that, because there was this very lovely young lady, very quiet and polite, but very energetic and enthusiastic too, a young lady named Jessica, who was a participant in the festival that year. And we discovered on the first day of the festival that Jessica had zero guitar playing experience and zero music experience. And what happened was that her family was asking advisors at her school about summer camp opportunities and summer learning opportunities. And one of the things that came up at her school was the Classical Minds Guitar Festival. So without ever having played the guitar at all, without ever having studied music, Jessica was enrolled in the Classical Minds Guitar Festival. And they came to me and they said, could you tutor this young lady? Because we want Jessica to be able to participate in the festival, but this festival, of course, is chiefly intended for people who have some kind of experience with the guitar and some kind of experience with music reading. And I said, okay, great. I'll meet with her on a daily basis. That was a Monday. The next day, I woke up, and the first thing I did before I even got out of the bed I was sleeping in was pull out my laptop and write the piece you're looking at on the screen right now. I wrote it with the idea in mind that I was going to spend the week teaching Jessica about 6 notes, and basically just quarter notes and half notes and whole notes, among the simplest rhythmic values in musical notation, and that I would enable her to, at the end of the week, be able to participate in the guitar orchestra performance that takes place at the end of the festival each year. So you can see that the part I've written for her here is quite simple. It's on what for most guitar methods are the first a couple of strings upon which guitarists learn, and And then there's a more complex part for me to play down here, as you can see. This is the accompanimental part that was there to serve as a sort of support for Jessica. And one of the other neat things about that was not only did Jessica and one of the other students present, Cynthia, get to play this piece that was written specifically for them, but they got to play with a very fine guitarist um, who I had befriended some time before that, named Jesus Serrano. Some of you know Jesus as Chucho. Chucho is from Mexico, and he's a very fine competition-winning guitarist. He's won, I don't actually know how many first prizes in international competitions all over the world, but he's also a good friend. And I asked him if he might be willing to sit in and play with these people, and he said I would be happy to. So Jessica, for her first ever performance, after playing guitar for about 5 or 6 days, got to play with a world class guitarist, which I thought was pretty cool. And again, I did this because I wanted her to feel included. I wanted her to feel as though she was part of this community and that she was benefiting from this community. Finally, I want to share with you the fact that I think it's important for us to consider the value of community building beyond the guitar itself, because the guitar community cannot exist without non-guitarists. Okay, I think most of the people who are on this call right now are, in fact, people who play the guitar or have played the guitar, who may be studying the guitar actively or have studied the guitar in a formal capacity in the past. But um, the guitar can't exist without guitar lovers. And many of those guitar lovers are people who just enjoy the guitar. They don't necessarily play the guitar. So I have been very fortunate, as I mentioned earlier, to have been able to collaborate all these years with my best friend and my exceptional duet partner. If you've never heard her sing, you've got to look for an opportunity to hear her sing. My very talented duet partner, Brandy Estwick, the mezzo soprano, who, by the way, has just concluded her doctoral studies at the University of North Texas. So she is now Dr. Brandy Estwick. I began many years ago arranging music for guitar and voice so that Dr. Estwick and I could perform together, and for guitar ensemble and voice so that Dr. Estwick and I could do this together. This is the first guitar ensemble arrangement that I ever did for guitar ensemble and voice. And you can see here I have the piece arranged in a way that we have, again, some relatively simple parts like the guitar 3 part you see here with some pretty slow moving notes, easy to play. You can see that I have some somewhat more complex parts above that where people have to play double stops or 2 notes at a time, sometimes chords. But we have a considerably more complex solo part here. Now, there's an interesting thing for those of you who read music that you may already have noticed, and that is that the key signature here differs for the soloist than it does for the other parts. The original O Mio Babino Caro, very famous, has been used in commercials and movies and TV shows over and over and over again because of how beloved it is. The original is an A flat, so I kept it in the original key, but I wanted the soloist to be freer to arpeggiate the guitar, much like the harp was performing sweeping arpeggiations in the original orchestral setting that Puccini created. So what I did was I asked my soloist to slap on a capo and do a little bit of an alternative tuning, or for you non-guitarists, scordatura tuning, and it made it a much more vibrant, a much more resonant part. And Taylor, my good friend from the New Orleans Guitar Trio here, was kind enough to be our guitar soloist on this piece at the last edition of the Houston Classical Guitar Festival. Marta has not only played this piece in Dallas and in Houston, but also was playing on this piece in Madrid back in 2014. I think it was 2014. Yes, I think that's right. But here, of course, we can see that the vocal soloist enters at measure 5, so that we have the harp-like accompaniment from guitar 1 here, considerably more complex and more demanding than the simpler accompaniment parts here that, again, were designed to be inclusive of players with far less experience, and then the beautiful singing that comes from what you see here. So that was just kind of a little bit of what I began to do a number of years ago. I don't remember the year of that arrangement, but I do remember that, of course, the first time we played it in Madrid was in 2014, so it has been around for a number of years. But I shortly thereafter began to arrange pieces for 2 voices and a guitar ensemble. So here we have an arrangement that I did of the Barcarolle from Tales of Hoffmann. It's probably the most famous selection from Offenbach's Tales of Hoffmann. You can see that there are 2 vocal soloists indicated here. Guitar parts are a little simpler in the middle. I would say guitar 2 is probably the simplest part, and there's a little bit more skill required to play the guitar 3 part, at least at the beginning. But those parts become somewhat simpler as we move forward. There are some chordal gestures in each of the three guitar parts, but there's a great deal of repetition in them as well, because here, of course, we have our vocalists entering, and as we move forward, not only does the first vocalist enter, but then we begin to hear the vocal duet from these two singers. And this is a selection that I've used. It was premiered at Brookhaven by my Brookhaven Allegro Guitar Orchestra, but it's also been used in an annual event that I began about 4 years ago at Eastfield called the High School Guitar Program Showcase. It's an annual high school guitar program showcase that has now expanded to include middle schools as well. Students in the Dallas and Fort Worth area are invited to participate in this guitar ensemble. It's not a competition. It's not something that's scored in the way that UIL is scored. It's actually something that I just do and I conceived of in order to bring guitarists together to get to know each other from other schools. We've had participants in the past from Garland High School. Actually, we've had Garland High School every year. We've had participants in the past from Booker T. We've had participants from IL Texas Garland. We've had participants from the IL Texas location in downtown Dallas, Grand Prairie Fine Arts Academy. We've had middle schools from other IL Texas locations. Last year we had the IL Texas from North Richland Hills. It's been a pleasure to bring together my Eastfield College guitar students, my Eastfield campus guitar students with the members of these high school ensembles. And we've had guitar orchestras combined from students from all these schools up to approximately 60 members. And if you've never gotten to play in an ensemble of that size, at the same time that it can be unwieldy a little bit, it's actually a great deal of fun. And again, the entire objective is to try to help guitarists recognize the value. And I don't want to just say value, I want to say necessity of getting people to work together. So I just wanted to share with you a little bit of my work and a little bit of what inspires my work. And essentially, what I want to recommend that you all do is look for opportunities to work together, look for opportunities to meet and fellowship and kind of connect on a positive level with other guitarists. Look for opportunities to avail yourself of all the great performances that organizations like the Arts and Humanities program at UTD, Collin College, Dallas College, the Texas Guitar Society, the Allegro Guitar Society, all these great societies just based right here in Dallas and Fort Worth create opportunities for you to hear beautiful guitar playing, to learn more about guitarists and guitar music. And I hope if you don't routinely avail yourself of all of those resources, I want to encourage you to do that. I want you to encourage you, as I have, to check out the Allegro Guitar Society website, check out the UTD Guitar website, check out the Dallas College website, talk to Sebastian about his Mountain View Guitar Festival and about his video series. And you know what? Hey, New Orleans isn't that far, y'all. It's an 8-hour drive from where I live. So to talk to Taylor about his New Orleans guitar trio. Talk to Abraham about his endeavors as a solo guitarist and opportunities to hear Abraham play. And that's we can't have this community if we don't support each other. And I've always said that you don't have to be best friends with everybody, but I think you kind of have to be willing to work with just anybody in your guitar community if you want it to grow. And I have a very deeply vested interest in wanting it to grow. The last thing I want to say, for those of you I've not had the good fortune of meeting before, if you're interested in becoming more sort of integrally connected to the guitar activities in Dallas-Fort Worth, I, for many of years, have maintained an email newsletter. And if you want to join into that email newsletter, you can contact me. I'm going to drop my own email address in the chat. You can shoot me an email and say, hey, this is so-and-so, and I want to be on that newsletter. I was just putting out an email this morning to the newsletter about this event and this series, and I'm going to be putting out more of them. You can also learn more about some of your Dallas-Fort Worth guitarists from the area by reading some of the back issues. I do a DFW Guitar Spotlight series that has featured guitarists such as Brian Burns, who is both a very accomplished guitarist but also an author. Also the Kid Through a Guitar Duo featuring Fernand Vera and Olga Almaquina Vera of Collin College. And I'm going to be doing one about Abraham and the Texas Guitar Society soon, and we'll continue to do so for a number of other guitarists from our area, from Dallas and Fort Worth. So I'd love to have you on the list if you're not already on it. Um, Listen, thank you very much for listening today. I know there are a couple of other chats that were dropped in, and I want to see if anybody has any questions, but that's essentially all I wanted to say. So now I'd like to open it up to Abraham and all of the rest of you to ask whatever questions you may have. I'm going to kind of maximize my chat here so I can see this. Yes, thank you, Marta. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Mr. Eddie Healy. I will be very happy if you are able to tell us where can we buy this music, and it will be a good opportunity for us to maybe play it in the SMU Guitar Ensemble.
Oh, I'd love that.
I think Mr. Guthrie will be happy to have your music to be performed by us, the pretty much the Texas Guitar Society / students at SMU. So that would be very, very nice if we can.
Thank you, Abraham. Yeah, I appreciate that reminder, and I've just dropped that in the chat. You can get it from the publisher directly. The publisher also has password-protected PDFs that you can download, and they have PDF pluses, which have sort of extra content. You can also find this most of these publications at stringsbymail.com. So I'm going to pull up that sort of search filter from Strings by Mail where you can see that, and hopefully you all will avail yourselves of that. In fact, a lot of times I've been using Strings by Mail for years for my sheet music, and it's funny. I typed in my name at the Strings by Mail website, and the first thing to come up was a series of Eddie Van Halen picks, apparently. But that's okay. So my sheet music publications come up as well, so y'all can check those out there. But anyway, thanks for that reminder. That was something I'd planned to share with you all and neglected to do that.
Absolutely. There was another question by Ivan Awayo saying that if you can share the link for an event that you were talking about. Would you mind typing the event for us of the Dallas-Fort Worth area so we can inform our students?
Now, are we talking about, Ivan, I think you might be talking about that high school showcase that Marta dropped in the chat. Is that what you were referring to?
I think that's what that was, yes.
Okay, yeah, Ivan. So we didn't host the event this year because of COVID, as you might imagine. I'm hoping that things can be normalized to some degree so that we can host the event again next year. Now that Dallas College has combined into one college, I'm going to be talking to Sebastian and our colleagues from the other campuses in the district about getting more students from other campuses involved in the event as well. But yes, we welcome high school students, especially students in formalized high school programs, but not just formalized high school programs. I've also had some other private students at the high school level who participate in the event. So Ivan, if you, what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, if you could email me, Ivan, I don't think you're on my DFW Guitar Professionals newsletter. I'd like to add you to it. I believe Abraham is, but I have a generalized newsletter for everybody. You don't have to be a guitarist. You don't have to be a professional. You probably have to be a human being to read it, but that's about it. That's the criteria, is be a human being. But Ivan, I also have one for professionals who might need to know about teaching opportunities, might want to know about a good guitar for sale, might want to spread the word about a new accomplishment of theirs. They may say, hey, I have a new publication, or I've got a big concert coming up. And so I'd love to add you to that if you want to email me. That way I'll have your email address and I can add you to it. And I'll be kind of spreading the word when the next opportunity to have our high school guitar program showcase comes around. And Marta has participated in this event several times. Marta has been studying with me at Eastfield for a number of years. And so, Marta, I think you've probably participated in every edition of the high school guitar program showcase, have you not?
Yes, I have.
I thought so. And Marta, do you enjoy the opportunity to get together with all those kids on stage and make this big guitar orchestra and perform alongside Dr. Estwick and the other solos we've had?
I love it. And of course, I could be grandmother or maybe great-grandmother to most of those kids. And it just makes me feel good that they're working on something that creates beauty and creates community. I just love the event. Yes.
Good, good, good. Well, we've been happy to have you, and those students have gotten opportunities to play with professional guitarists from some of the high schools. They've gotten an opportunity to perform not only with my very fine duet partner, but also with one of our other faculty members from the voice department at Eastfield College, Farah Paramsi. We did the arrangement that I showed you earlier on the screen of Offenbach's Tales of Hoffman with two of the most perfectly paired voices I've ever heard. The combination of Dr. Estwick's sound and the sound of Professor Paramsi together is just amazing. The level of coordination and the way that those timbres complement each other. And I think for kids at the high school level to be able to perform with professional vocal artists who have been involved in the Dallas Opera and have done staged productions of other kinds too. It's that's the kind of opportunity that I wish I had when I was in high school, and now I want to make sure that that our current generation or the upcoming generation of aspiring professional guitarists have more opportunities than we had when we were their age. I don't know if I might have missed some other questions from the chat, so I was kind of scrolling back through. But please, if anybody else has any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
I do have some questions for you, Mr. Healy.
Okay.
Do you know any other guitar orchestras that you have collaborated with around the area that maybe there is something that you would like to do with them? Maybe you want to bring, for example, I know the TCC, there is a TCC guitar ensemble, and it will be nice to have maybe a bigger event of guitar ensembles in the near future. Maybe whenever the COVID virus it's gone,
Yes.
can start planning some of those things.
I'd love to do more. I'm always looking for opportunities to collaborate because those opportunities are there in part for people like us, but they're also really there for the students. And I think the students don't understand innately how much they're going to need. They're going to need to network. You know, they don't get into school thinking, I'm going to go to school, but what I got to make sure I do is shake a lot of hands and kiss a lot of babies, you know, if I want opportunities. But the reality is, oh, by the way, you don't actually literally have to kiss babies. I never had to kiss babies to get jobs, but you know, there is still a political element to what we're doing. And I think the kids, it's a value that we have to instill in these kids in the way that my mom instilled that value in me. I've had people come up to me. I had a quite intelligent and talented colleague of mine who's a pianist come up to me a number of years ago and say, "Hey, did I hear that you teach at UTD?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I teach one class, but yeah, I teach at UTD." And he said, "Well, how'd you get that?" And I said, "Oh, I knew somebody there." And he said, "Oh, okay." He said, "Man, I've been trying to get more teaching opportunities, and it's just been a slog. It's been really difficult, and I just don't even know where to start." This is the problem. This is the problem that so many of our fellow professionals have, that they don't realize that it's not, I hate to say it, maybe it should be in an ideal world, but it's not just about the work. It's not. It's about the work. It's about who you know. It's about getting to know and ingratiate yourself to as many people as you can. That's where the opportunities come from. You know, maybe a meritocracy is the ideal, and maybe just the best people and the most intelligent, most accomplished people should get opportunities. But you know, if you're highly accomplished and you're highly respected, but you're respected in a very small circle, the problem is you're going to lose out on opportunities because there just aren't that many people who know how intelligent, brilliant, and talented and skillful you are. So I've got a colleague over at Eastfield campus who's fond of saying, "No one's going to toot your own horn for you. You got to do it for yourself." And he's a horn player, by the way, so you know he thinks that way. But he's right. But the difference is, I think we can do it for each other, and I think we guitarists, especially, we got to stick together. You know, being classical guitarists and promoting classical guitar literature and promoting the technique that we employ, we're in a bit of a rarefied class, and I think in order to sustain our own efforts in the long term, not just to have a really great guitar community right now or have a really great event, but to do what Abraham is talking about and to build more good events and more events in which we can collaborate with each other, I think is essential. It's not just a good idea, it's essential. So Abraham, yeah, I'd love to see things like that happening between other campuses of Dallas College, TCC, Collin College. I've done a little bit of working with, actually pretty recently, I was working with Professor Vera, Dr. Vera, over at Collin College, and my duet partner. We were doing some work together at Collin College, and I think we should continue to be creative about ways to create these opportunities.